Welcome to my Multicultural and Indigenous Studies tutorial. In this brief video, we'll be looking at one historic issue that affects Indigenous students and one innovation that's been designed to support Indigenous students and their education. Before we get into that though, I'll just let you know that all my sources are listed at the end of this presentation under the slide headings. So for every slide that has a source involved, you'll be able to find it there clearly labelled. Alright, let's get into it. These are all photographs here on the screen before you of children who were removed during what became known as the Stolen Generations. Before we really get into detail, let's briefly look at what this is. Between the years 1910 and the 1970s, children of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander descent were removed from their parents under the idea of assimilation. The intent was to breed out the Indigenous cultures and, where possible, to assimilate Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples into society. It was believed that this would be much easier to achieve with children rather than adults, and thus the forcible removal of children, most usually children known as half-castes, children of one Aboriginal parent and one European parent. These children were placed in foster homes and institutions, and taught that they were white, both in skin colour and culture, and thus to disassociate with Indigenous peoples. In both foster homes and institutions, many children were abused, whether physically, psychologically or sexually, and were given unlimited education, as it was expected that they would work as domestic servants or labourers. Siblings were separated, and some never found their families again. It would be a mistake to believe that the stolen generation ceased in the 1970s, for people are still directly affected today. These images are of Indigenous peoples in 2008, when Kevin Rudd made his famous sorry speech. It's clear from these images that time had not healed all wounds, and that people are still very emotionally involved, whether from relief that an apology had finally been made, or because it reopened the old wounds and revisited the trauma of that time. So in thinking about the stolen generations, we need to be reminded that it's an extremely sensitive topic, and we need to show respect for people when we discuss it. Alright, to prove that children were removed by law, here is a section from the 1939 Aboriginal Preservation and Protection Act. And as you can see in that highlighted section there, it clearly states that all Indigenous children under the age of 21 belonged to the Director of Aboriginal Affairs, if he believed that the parents or relatives were not caring for the child. This was often used as a reason for taking a child, suggesting that they were neglected when in truth they were simply removed. Now there are a number of strategies used to remove the children, and in most cases the children were absolutely fine and safe at home, but were taken away from their families. Let's have a look at how many children were removed. Imagine for a moment that this little blue man represents one person. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 people. Think of it as 10 children. Let's put faces to those children. So here are 2 little ones, another 2, so that's 4, 3 more, another 1, 2, 3. So there's 10 children. Times those 10 children by 10,000 and you get 100,000 children. During the years between 1910 and the 1970s, more than 100,000 children were removed from their families. Before we examine the long-lasting impacts of such forceful removal upon both the children removed and the following generations, we'll briefly look at the stories of 2 Aboriginal people who were removed from their families. Right, this is a video of a man named Michael Welsh, and he briefly talks about his removal and the impact that it has on him. So let's watch that now.
I'm James Michael Woody Welsh. I was an 8-year-old when we went, and I clearly remember them at the station, Central Station. They told us that they were going to bring the other brothers and sisters on the next train. Me and my older brother Barry, we was going to go on the first train, and we knew that wasn't true, and they wasn't going to bring a special train for them back up in here. But what can we do? We just, went along with them where they took us, and it was down to this place that was down called Kinchela. When we were born, we were given a spirit and a soul by the Creator, but they turned around and dismantled that, or bloody sort of flogged it out of us. So we got caught up in that, traumatised, still going through it. Not only, most people do, but never ever had that feeling that of home and being allowed to be home again. I'm waiting for that day to come. I'm still trying to find my world at the moment. It feels good when I meet the brothers from the past, from the homes and that, but I can't take that feeling home with me when I go home. It dissolves when we split up and go each our own separate ways again. So, I'm not just the one that feels this hurt and pain now. I've got 8 children, and they all feel the same. And something I didn't want. I tried to protect them from it. But
We'll stop it there. So you can see that Michael's still very affected now, and that effect and that trauma isn't limited to him and to his generation. He has 8 children, and now they all feel the same, and I imagine now that those children have children, and so the effect and the trauma goes down the generations. So as I said before, it's still an extremely sensitive issue, and there are still many, many people grieving. Now this is another testimony. This is a lady named Rita Wenberg, and you can watch her testimony online. I've just summarized it for us today. So you can see in that top left-hand corner, that's her family there, her mum and her dad, and down below is her and her sister. Now in 1943, Rita and her siblings were taken from her parents. She was 3 years old at the time and was placed into Cootamundra Girls' Home. In her testimony, amongst other things, she states that abuse was a natural thing in the home. It's hard to believe that one would think of abuse as natural, but they didn't know any other way. She later revealed that she was sexually abused during her time in the home. She described the deputy matron as cruel, as she used to hit Rita over the head. Perhaps the saddest thing of all was that neither she nor the other children thought of this as abuse. They just figured, that's natural. It's just life. The one kind member of the staff left the home because she couldn't stand the abuse. Now Rita and her sisters used to run away, and they were caught by the local policeman and brought back. But interestingly, even he identified at the time, he said, "There's a reason why these girls are running away." Rita, because she was taken from her family as just a little 3-year-old, had no concept of family. She was trained as a white child and came to believe that she was. Now the children at school used to call her a blackie. She would respond, "I'm not black, my shoes are black." Now, even in her older age, she still at times thinks of herself as white. She has no cultural ties, this is what she's said, no cultural ties and no concept of who she is. This she described as her biggest hurt. When her father was killed at age 17, she went to see him and felt no emotional attachment to him. She didn't know him at all, and when her aunt said, "Don't you feel anything?" she said no, and just shrugged her shoulders and walked away. During the interview, Rita said that she avoided Aboriginal people for the rest of her life. Those she tries to interact with said that she talked like a white fella. In being raised as white, she lost her ties with her people and her land. Now she feels like she dwells in a strange no-man's land, as she's not fully white nor fully Aboriginal. In watching the filmed interview, Rita burst into tears. So she's obviously still deeply hurt, and time hasn't healed her wounds. So that's just 2 of the Stolen Generation members and the hurts that they've experienced. Now, as I said before, it impacts over successive generations. There are drug use and behavioural problems, delinquency issues, people still suffer from racism, mental and physical health issues, there are broken families and communities, a loss of cultural heritage, and undermined parenting skills. And it's those loss of cultural heritage and undermined parenting skills that particularly affect the children in our classrooms today. If we look at Rita, it was that loss of cultural ties. She doesn't know who she is, she has no family history, and her children, as well, don't have that family history. Michael said that his spirit that the Creator gave him was broken, taken away, and he never feels like he belongs. He now has 8 children, and I imagine that a part of that grief that he feels has been given to them. Alright, so the undermined parenting skills both Rita and Michael talk about. It can be summarized in a very loose attempt like this. Because they were taken from their homes, they had no model for parenting, which means that when they came to have children, they had no loving role model on which to base their own parenting styles. Now, this isn't hard and fast for all children that were taken, but a high number have reported this. When they had children, they then feared that their children would be taken away, and they couldn't trust the authorities. But that could mean schools, and that can mean doctors, and it means that their children then are at risk of neglect. And then because of that neglect, they're taken away. And so it's been reported that a cyclical history of neglectful parenting and children taken away has come down the next few generations. Now, a loss of cultural heritage can include a mistaken or lost identity, a lack of belonging, Indigenous culture that's been greatly changed because it was orally handed down. So in the removal of children, there was a break in the oral history. They don't know who they are now, and a lot of history has been lost or changed. And finally, there's been an impact on ability to gain native title. To gain that title, you have to be able to prove that your ancestors worked on the land prior to the arrival of the Europeans in 1788. If you've lost your cultural heritage, you can't prove that. And so land that should be rightfully yours, you're unable to claim because you can't prove, or you don't know enough about your ancestors to prove that they were there and working and living on the land prior to European arrival. The final one, it can be titled Growing Up with Ghosts. Now, it's been suggested that children of parents who are members of the stolen generations often grieve for the family they never knew. Gaps are present in the family history, and parents may never disclose their distressing memories to their children, nor show photographs or give the names of the family who were lost. Now, Rita said in the interview, she's never told her children what happened to her. She said she's never told anyone what happened to her. She doesn't want to tell people, and she can't tell people. So her children have this continual unfulfilled sense of what really happened to mum. This isn't confined to children and grandchildren of members of the stolen generation. Children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors have expressed similar feelings. One child of a Holocaust survivor described this phenomenon in their childhood growing up as suggesting that she grew up knowing people she didn't know, mourning people she thought were dead but never actually knew for sure. And for children, that's going to be emotionally taxing and draining, knowing, carrying around that burden with you every day and never being able to find closure because there isn't any closure to be found. There's only a resolve to be unresolved. So for children sitting in our classrooms, we've got to keep in mind that there's a high chance that they too will be experiencing this kind of conundrum or quandary. And we can be really empathetic towards that. We don't necessarily have to say anything to them, but we can just care for them. All right, so that concludes our investigation of the stolen generations. Let's now move on to an investigation of an innovation that's been suggested to help support Indigenous education in schools. Before I name the innovation, seeing as we're talking about education and we're talking about school, let's talk about why it's so important to go to school. Now, the following reasons were taken from a study done in 2009 by the Commissioner for Children and Young People of Western Australia, and it was looking at children and their approach and their ideas about school, but it lists the following reasons as why school is important and what school can do for kids. So let's have a look. Number 1, increased confidence and self-worth. 2, the development of literacy and numeracy skills. And I think we can probably extend that not just to literacy and numeracy, but to a better grasp of academia as it is. It teaches kids respect. So you can see not only does it help students academically, but also with values and in confidence. Next, schools can help in the reduction of emotional and behavioural problems. They help in the development of friendships and social inclusion. And schools help in skill and talent development. And I'd also like to add one more. Why is school important? School also helps kids to learn about protecting themselves and about safety. And between the hours of, say, 8:30 and 4 o'clock, parents can be assured that their children are in a safe, secure, and healthy environment. Now, why have we just looked at why school is important? If we look at this graph here, this graph shows school attendance in semester 1, 2015, and documents what percent of students attended school more than 90% of the time. Now you can see that the lighter coloured bar are non-Indigenous Australians, and that the ochre coloured bar are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. In every area looked at, the attendance levels of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples were lower than that of their non-Indigenous students. And this isn't just in high schools. This is students from year 1 to year 10. If we think about the reasons we just discussed before, it means that that percentage of Indigenous students who aren't attending regularly and those of the non-Indigenous Australians who aren't attending regularly are missing out on being developed in those areas and learning those skills. Now, this came to the attention of the Australian government in 2013, and in their Closing the Gap speech, or their Closing the Gap program, they said that one of their goals was to get the attendance levels of Indigenous students to more than 90%. So they introduced the following strategy. It's known as the Regional School Attendance Strategy, and it was devised by the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, Nigel Scullion. It's been running since 2013 and is currently running now, and it's due to conclude in 2018. Now, what is it? It is a team of more than 500 workers, and there are some of those workers you can see there in the yellow shirts, who are working in 73 schools across 74 remote communities. And if I show you the map here, you can see those little schools are all the schools that the RSAS, Remote School Attendance Strategy, is being conducted in. Now, these attendants will go every morning. They go and they meet with the students and they bring them to school. Let's have a look at some of the typical duties of the RSAS officers. So, number 1, they talk with kids and families about the importance of going to school every day. Number 2, they work with schools in tracking attendance and documenting attendance, and then helping work out which students aren't there and why they aren't there. Number 3, they help with the practical things like going to houses every day and picking up the kids. Now, this might be just creating a walking group and walking together, or physically going around and picking up kids in the buses or the cars. They celebrate attendance and reward students for consistent effort. And finally, they also help with the practical needs such as school uniforms, helping kids with their uniforms. They help with homework, and they make sure kids have lunch and breakfast every day. So I pulled this straight off the website for the Remote School Attendance Strategy, and it states that their goal as an organisation is to address the following. The issue. So, at the moment, we've got a 50% attendance rate, or they did when the program started. Now, because of their poor school attendance, Indigenous students have not been able to achieve as highly, per se, as their non-Indigenous counterparts, and it's been suggested that these two areas are linked together. The goal of the RSAS is to increase school attendance to a 90% attendance rate across all of Australia by 2018. So that's not just the remote schools, that's schools in rural areas and also in metropolitan areas. But overall, they want a 90% attendance rate. And the achievements so far, we should note that there are 14,000 students who are being supported daily in, as I said, 73 schools across 74 remote communities, which is pretty amazing when you think about prior to 2012, these students didn't have the support they needed to get to school. Now this video looks at one school, Kupapiti Regional School, and it looks at the work of the remote school attendance officers and their students. Let's have a look and see what they're doing.
We found out that most of the kids was coming to school was hungry, and so we had to identify all that areas of what we can improve to make sure the kids go to school. So we identify that they need that bus run to go to school, and when they get out of school they need that breakfast club, and plus with us guys going out doing home visits to the parents, we get to know or find out how we can help them in ways of getting their children to school.
The big difference that we're doing now is, working with the parents. It started off slow, but now eventually it's just moving on and getting better and better with the breakfast club and, the pickups and just getting really involved with the kids and the parents. Here to help the parents as well and everybody in the community. So once they figured out that, we're here to help, then they started joining in and, with a bit of help that we're giving them, it's really good that, now they getting their kids up and sending them to school, and, I think their attendance is just changing as well. So their schooling and their days of coming to school. It's just changed.
This is Cubapedi Area School, and we are in the breakfast club, where all the children come before school to have breakfast or do a bit of activities before school, because they have breakfast, they'll do well for the day.
It's fun and it's good for kids to come in and they can have a nice breakfast.
It's the total passion that my team has in connecting with the families, connecting with the students, being able to come and talk to the kids. Total concentration on the welfare of the children and the working with the families, that we've actually managed to up the percentage rate here at Cubapedi.
My kids wasn't going to school that much, and ever since I noticed that, I wanted to help my kids to get up and go to school every day. Better education means better jobs.
Education is important, and it's their number one priority for them as well as their children, especially if they want to see them succeed and live a happier, better life.
I reckon there could be a possibility that someone in this town could be Prime Minister. Never know.
So you can see there that Cubapedi Area School is making a big difference. The RSAS is making a huge difference to kids, and I think it's particularly interesting in saying that they've identified the children need their breakfast club. They're satisfying Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Because if kids are coming to school hungry, they can't concentrate in lessons. They can't help but be focused on the fact that their stomach is empty. So in making sure that kids are fed, they're helping to maximise learning when kids are at school. And it's really brilliant as well to see the parental involvement. So the RSAS, we know that it is a strategy that's been introduced to help boost school attendance. It's employing around 500 workers to go and collect the students, to assist them with getting to school, with their homework, with food, with clothing, and it's also working to establish solid bonds between schools, the workers and the parents. Let's have a look for a moment at what they're doing really well. We can see that school attendance is improving, an absolute improvement. So let me see, in the last data that was given out, so this was a little earlier this year concerning semester 2 last year, we can see that of the number of students attending in semester 2, 2013, that number is increased by 9%, so that at the end of semester 2, 2015, 9% more students were attending school than in 2013. So that's brilliant. Yep, if we look here, we can see that this was data that was produced just before that, so the end of semester 1 last year. 67% of schools responded that they'd seen an increase. So that's 49 out of the 73 schools. Admittedly, 28% of schools, so 21 schools, had said that they saw a decrease, and 4% said that they'd seen no increase at all. But that 67% is definitely the overwhelming figure. Sure, there's still a gap now that needs to be filled between how many are coming and how many need to come to reach that 90%, but that those students who are coming are now being taught in these areas more than if they had not been coming to school. So that's excellent to see. Also, in the creation of the strategy, more than 500 jobs have been made. Now, those 500 jobs are filled solely by Indigenous workers, and in taking on those jobs, they're being taught the skills and gaining the confidence then to go and apply for other jobs which they're getting, helping to reach new horizons, which is very exciting. We also should consider the issues. Firstly, some staff have reported that in sending kids back to school, there's disruption in class now. There is a rise in bullying, and teachers' personal stress in class has arisen because some of the students who weren't attending were disruptive kids before they left. We should also note that there's been some parental resistance. They've been disrespectful to the RSA officers, which has led to a poor recruitment for future officers. Also, it's an extremely high cost. So it's literally multiple millions have been spent on this strategy, and whilst that 9% increase is excellent, it's a lot of cost for not necessarily the big impact they were hoping. And that 90% attendance rate has not yet been reached. the Minister for Education in the Northern Territory, Paul Chandler, was asked, do you think that this spending is justified? And he said, in all honesty, no. He thinks that for the money that's being spent, they should be seeing a greater return of student reattendance. So if we think about the cost of the program, so at the moment it's costing a lot of money, and there's a further 80 million pledged for 2016 to 2018. And there's that potential classroom disruption, raised teacher stress and increased bullying, versus the results of the program, an increase of attendance, so kids are coming back to school. There are more than 500 jobs for Indigenous people now, plus skills to go on to other jobs. So is the cost outweighing the results, is the question we need to ask. We've seen improvement, we've seen jobs, we know that it's been extended to 2018, but I think to make a call, a definitive call, I think we'll just have to wait and see. Me personally sitting here, I think that the scheme is excellent. I think it's wonderful that children are now coming back to school and being developed and achieving. Not to suggest, of course, that this wouldn't happen outside of school, but I would suggest that it's at a slightly higher and a more accelerated result in school. And if we can keep those kids there and help them through to the HSC or to the higher years of schooling, we'll be helping to set them up for a future of potential employment, which is excellent. But I think to make the definitive call, we'll just have to wait until the end of 2018 to see. So thank you for watching this presentation. Here are the sources that I've used. So you can see there that I've got the slide and the topic along with the reference. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are all the resources I've used. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this useful.